thing is, I don't think I'm going to be at all famous. I'm not a girl trying to be a star. I'm just a girl that sings.
I was looking for a project to do after Senna. I'd been offered lots of sports films. Didn't want to do another sport film. Quite happy with the one we made. And then the producer, James Gay Reese, who produced Senna as well, called me up and said, look, I've just had this call from someone at Universal Music asking me if I'd be interested in producing a film about Amy. He immediately thought there was a project there, and he called me up and said, what do you think? And I had a quick think about it and did a bit of research. And it just seemed like everyone talked about her voice and, you know, how sad it was the way it turned out the way it did. I guess I had lots of questions about why things turned out the way they did.
How big do you think you're going to be?
I don't at all, because, you know, my music is not on that scale. The music is not on that scale. Sometimes I wish it was, but I don't think I'm going to be at all famous. I don't think I could handle it. I'd probably go mad, you know what I mean? I would go mad.
You need to have lots of layers to a story. There's got to be a lot of layers for it to feel like a movie. If it's one simple thing, then it doesn't quite feel like enough. And with Amy, there was always drama. I remember looking at material and she was either brilliant or it was really bad. There was very little, there was no mediocre, there was nothing in the middle. And you need that. You need something to kind of peg a story onto. Quite early on, I started looking at the lyrics, and I couldn't believe I didn't notice them before, but the lyrics seem to have all of the answers that you want already there. She'd put them down on a page from the age of 17, 18, right away to 21, 22, and she went back to black. And so it just became an idea of using the songs as a spine and to unravel each one to understand what they were actually about and who they were about.
We'd recorded quite a few demo recordings, and I started to talk about whether she'd ever consider writing. She said she's not sure about writing songs, but she's written a lot of poems. She knew full well she'd been writing songs, but they were very personal songs.
The issue with Amy is that she was very down-to-earth, girl next door, ordinary, and actually from Back to Black onwards, she hardly gave an interview. So there was very little material. And I didn't know that at the beginning, but I realised when we did our research, she gave a lot of interviews, was very mouthy, during Frank, the first album, first period, and then shut down, didn't speak again. So it was always going to be tricky to get her voice across and her point of view, which is why the songs became even more important. There was nobody that had been around the whole time. Lots of different groups of people, different compartments. Amy had people in different compartments of her life, and they were all separate. Most of them didn't talk or didn't get along or blamed one another. So the idea was that we had to investigate and figure out what connected them, what was the situation, what did go on. And with Amy, the whole film really started with the audio. I, one by one, would meet people and interview them, put their interviews down on tape. No cameras, no visuals, just talk to them and let them talk about whatever they felt comfortable talking about. It'd get very emotional, there'd be a lot of tears. And only after they trusted me and there was a relationship between the two of us did they feel willing to then hand over any personal photos, home videos or footage. And what would happen is one person would open up and they would then open the door to two other people who would open the door to two other people. And somehow behind our backs, they all started to talk and said, well, actually, maybe you should just meet him. That was really the big job for me, was to one by one earn the trust of these people who have never spoken, never given an interview, were in a lot of pain, angry with the media, angry with everyone really for what had happened, and they could see where this was going and no one else seemed to care and let it happen and kind of enjoyed the ride. But often the interviews would be 1 hour to start with, and it's like, just book an extra hour in case. So we'd have 2 hours, and then 3, 4, 5 hours later, we're still talking. And that would happen quite a lot. Once they started to talk, they needed to talk and get it all out, and they felt better. You could see visually they looked better after the interview than before.
The more people see of me, the more they'll realise that all I'm good for is making music.
What really affected us was seeing the young Amy material, how funny she was and how bright and full of life and cheerful and witty, really intelligent. I didn't know all of that, you know. And then you see that, and it affects everything that comes after it because you've seen who she really was. And that was a big part of what the friends would say again and again was, I hope you're going to show the real Amy, the real Amy. For them, that was the real Amy, the girl who wasn't famous, who just enjoyed picking up a guitar and singing and had fun and doing silly voices and just hanging out and flirting with everyone. And once you see that Amy, then the change and the way she ends up has a different resonance, I guess, because you can see how quickly it's happened, and there's still little signs to her humour and her in her eyes. You can just see the old Amy there, but it's all getting slightly clouded. I think that helped a lot. Every now and again, something funny coming along helps to lighten the mood. And then when she picks up a guitar and she sings and her voice comes out, they are really the high points. They're like the races in Senna, the action scenes. In Amy, this was always going to be a musical. So it was always going to be built around the performances. And the performances, whether brilliant or sometimes not so great, but even then they're full of emotion, really. They were always going to be what the structure was going to have to kind of build itself off of.
And the Grammy goes to Amy Winehouse.
She was one of the truest artists I ever heard.
In terms of the technical side of it, I normally just start off the film by having my own Avid to start with. I work with an assistant editor, and we just get all of the material and start chopping away and structuring it. There isn't enough material yet to actually hire an editor, so the editor doesn't start until 6 months or 8 months down the line. But we have a team of researchers who are just going through everything, sending it my way, saying, what do you think of this? Is this interesting? Is this interesting? I've heard an interview, this sounds great. And then it would be a matter of finding a little nugget of information and then figuring out where the original source is, contacting that person to see if they have the original tape. And that's the process that's continually going on. So it was a bit like detective work. It really is, because you know the ending, but you don't know anything else really, and you're trying to piece it together. And we're not adapting anyone's book. We're not going with one person's point of view. So really, everything that we hear, you take with a pinch of salt, and then you have to cross-reference it with 2 or 3 other people. And the heavier it got and the darker it got, the more you had to double-check your facts, because you can't say anything unless you know you can back it up.
I don't think I knew what depression was. I know I felt funny sometimes when I was different. I think it's a musician thing. That's why I write music. You know, I'm not like some messed up person, you know. There's a lot of people that suffer with depression that don't have an outlet, do you know what I mean? Can't pick up a guitar for an hour and feel better.
The bigger arc of the story is really Amy starts off, has a series of experiences, writes about it, makes her first album, Frank. Then everything changes in between, and then she meets Blake. She falls in love with him, they have an affair, he dumps her, goes back to his first girlfriend. She has a breakdown, she changes management, her grandmother dies. All these big events happen in her life, which then lead her to really hit rock bottom, and then out of that start to create again and write the second album that becomes huge. But that period there, in the middle, everything changed in her life. That's the key moment. She moves to Camden, starts hanging around with another group of people, gets into the Libertines, meets Doherty and blah, blah, blah. I didn't necessarily understand why did Amy get so heavily into the drugs with Blake? Why did she have to go so heavily into it? Why did she have to go from 0 to 100 in no time at all? But one of Blake's friends, who actually shot all of the footage in Miami, the wedding footage, summed it up by just saying, you know, she had to feel what he felt. If he was here and she was here, it wasn't right. She had to be equal to him. So whatever he did, she would do. She had to show how much she was in love with him by somehow being willing to do whatever he would do. And it just sort of made sense when someone says it and you go, okay, I see that now, because that's what she did. She just fell for him so big, she would go anywhere he wanted her to go.
Oh, it's a bit upsetting at the end, isn't it?
The interesting thing is when the audience see it, the real people start seeing the film and how they connect to it and what it says to them. So I'm now kind of gone too far in the journey. I now just am really interested to see how ordinary, real people who were fans or not fans. I just came from an interview with somebody who really couldn't care less about Amy and saw the film and fell in love with her. And I think that would be the ultimate, is people almost had an opinion because of all of the sound and noise and the paparazzi and all that loud stuff going on, and didn't really care for her. And then they see the real girl and you go, actually, she was quite sweet, she was all right, she was quite funny. You would have liked to have met her. She'd have been all right to hang around with. And she happened to be amazingly talented. And it makes it all the more sad the way things turned out.